Good afternoon, YouTube. In today's video, we're going to be going over what is philosophy. So I do want to make more philosophical topics on my channel, but every time that I start writing or recording a video, I feel that there's just not enough groundwork laid on my channel and that there's just too much for me to assume that you have come in contact with. Because the unfortunate reality, if you are living in America, is you don't really encounter philosophy, at least not at the high school level. If you encounter philosophy at the high school level, you either went to a private school, or if you encounter philosophy at all, you probably pursued higher education and it might have been a requirement. So the sad part about philosophy is that oftentimes people just think it's people sitting in a room asking why. People think that is just these very subjective arguments, and to an extent, they're not entirely wrong, but they are missing a much bigger picture about what philosophy is, and that's what this is this series of videos is aiming to alleviate. So, since this is primarily a strength, bodybuilding, like fitness channel, then I will be doing my absolute best to be dumbing down these ideas, and not because I don't think you are smart enough, but just because, we have other things to do, and like I just want to be able to spare you having to go home, do X amount of readings and homeworks, and try to commit so much more time into something that you might just have a passing interest in. I want to kind of meet you where you want to go, right? So let's get into this. What is philosophy? So if we look at the etymology of the word philosophy, there's a couple things we need to kind of understand. First is that the Greeks had four words for love. There was eros, which was a romantic love; storge. I really don't know how to pronounce this word. Which is familial love. You know, the love you have for like your, uh, like actually like blood kin. Because I know the a word coming up is gonna confuse you, or confuse the hell out of me. And then we have agape, which is unconditional or godly love. So this is the love that God gives to you. Or the love that, if someone has ever truly just unconditionally loved something, no matter how much it might inconvenience them, hurt them, or whatever, then that's kind of what it is. So basically, if you've ever had a pet, if you ever had a cat, a dog, a duck, a goose, a raccoon, you've probably had held unconditional love for this person or this thing. So that's what agape is. And then finally, there's philia, which is brotherly love, or like companionate love. I would say. So oftentimes we refer to our best of friends as bros, as brothers. We refer to our like other people in this community as brothers in iron. That's kind of the love we have here. So when you look at that word philia, we know that there are examples of the word being used for other things. So there's the audiophile, someone who's really interested into the fidelity of the music they listen to, or sounds, or something of that nature. A bibliophile, someone who collects books, who loves reading to no end. And then, of course, we have the examples that many people are much more familiar with. Like, I'm not going to say those words because I don't want this to get demonetized. Or I don't even monetize my videos. I just don't want this to get like taken down or some shit. But you see it. It's right there. We can't neglect it. But let's move on. And then finally, there's the latter part of the word Sophia, which is wisdom. So, therefore, philosophy, as the word implies, or this looking at the definition of the world based on its parts, is the love of wisdom. But then we kind of run into a question of, well, what is wisdom? And here are some necessary conditions. So, one thing that I really want to stress is the fact that just because you meet these necessary conditions, it doesn't guarantee that you're wise. It just guarantees that you are a candidate for being wise. Or if you meet these criteria, there's no guarantee you're wise. But if you do not meet these criteria, there is a guarantee that you are not wise. So let me try to break this down. What is a necessary condition for a square? A square has four sides. There is no such thing as a five-sided square. Now, does that mean everything that has four sides is a square? No, because let's say you have something that has four sides, but it's open. Like it's like, imagine like one of the walls on a square opened up. It's no longer a square. Now, let's say you also have something like a rectangle. It has four sides, but the length of each side is not equal, which is, let's say, another necessary condition for what a square is. And then suddenly it's not a square. So A necessary condition guarantees that it is a candidate to be something belonging to a certain category or label, but it doesn't guarantee that it is that thing. So that's what I mean there. So the first necessary condition for wisdom is that you get clear on what you believe. So what are some things that like people believe and might not be necessarily clear on? I mean, we've all encountered someone who was very religious, but not necessarily sure why. Oftentimes, it's just because they were raised that way, or maybe some other motivation. Maybe it's their political beliefs, or their ethical beliefs, their morality. And then something more relevant to us gym bros, how to build muscle and strength. And then the next necessary condition would then be, how do we get clear on why we believe something? It's not uncommon for people to believe things that they believe for bad reasons. Let's say, for example, I believe that if I drink a gallon of milk a day and run a 5x5, I am going to be as big and as buff as a professional bodybuilder. There is bad reasoning behind that, to say the least. So that is kind of an example there. And finally, the last necessary condition for wisdom is, do the reasons in number 2, so why we believe something, justify belief in 1, what we actually believe. So the question you want to ask yourself here is, would any rational, unbiased person agree that the reasons given in 2 are at least relevant to the belief in 1? So are the reasons of why you believe in something relevant to what you actually believe? Let's say, for example, you believe that you should be the king of France, and someone asks you, well, why do you believe you should be the king of France? Because the sun rose today and the light from the window hit my face. God has now chosen me to be the king of France. That's not how it works. There's no relevant relationship between why you believe something and what you believe. So that's one example of bad reasoning. Let's another one that's also relevant to what we do as recreational lifters, power lifters, bodybuilders, whatever. So this is the one that came to mind, but you can fill this in with a lot of different examples. So SFR, RIR, and MRV are the best ways to build muscle because my favorite YouTuber said so. That is bad reasoning. Let's say, for example, if you want to build the absolute biggest biceps you possibly can, you should do 50 different types of bicep curl variations for 4 sets of 25 to 30 reps, going all the way to failure. It doesn't really matter. It doesn't really matter because once you just say something like, "Oh, because my favorite YouTuber said so," anyone who is rational and unbiased, which is kind of rare, but most people would agree that just because your favorite YouTuber said so is not relevant enough to justify belief in what you actually believe. So there's an example there. I personally live in a city where there's a lot of gambling. So let's say, like, for example, I don't know if any of you have ever been in a casino, but they do have they have a screen showing you all of the previous rolls on a roulette table, like where the ball landed and everything like that. And it's to give you this false illusion that you can somehow predict a pattern. So let's say, for example, it lands on black 9 out of 10 times, and you think to yourself, I'm going to put all my money on red because it's due. Statistically speaking, red is coming up, so it has to happen. This is bad reasoning because every single time the ball rolls, it's an independent event. Let's say there's a 50-50 chance, just because you do something, just because it has went on the red side every single time before then, it doesn't guarantee that red is next, or it definitely doesn't guarantee that black is next. So that's kind of the thing there. So now that we're gonna just kind of really brush over the 4 branches of philosophy. So, like I said, philosophy is not just people sitting in a room asking each other why and then arguing with each other with no good reason, and then it's just all this subjective hoopla of like really weird people yelling at each other with beards, okay? That's not what philosophy is. So, philosophy is the mother of all sciences, and I believe it should be respected as such because there are aspects of it, and we're going to be going over that here. So, the first branch of philosophy is metaphysics, which is the study of what is, or that is a typo, or what exists. So this is just a very simplified definition. it's a temporarily sufficient definition, and it's something that we're going to go into more depth and more detail as this series continues. But metaphysics is the study of what is, or the study of what exists. Then epistemology is the study of what we know or what we think exists. So if metaphysics is the study of what exists, epistemology is the study of what we think exists. So there's a relationship there. And one way to kind of explore this relationship is the doctrine of cultural relativism. So, the doctrine of cultural relativism basically is that something is moral because the society deems it to be moral. So, we can look at a wide variety of weird practices. Like, I know for one, in Greek culture, it was the cultural norm to burn the bodies of the dead, as it was a way to respect their passing. Whereas in a tribe in Asia Minor, which is like, Middle East, India kind of area, there is a culture that believes that you should cannibalize your dead, that you should eat the bodies of your forefathers, your fathers, and whatnot, because then it will give you wisdom and strength from their lifetime. That's one example. Another example would be something like female circumcision in some countries, which is, some would argue something akin to mutilation. That's an example there. But because the society that it exists in believes it to be moral, then it is therefore moral by the doctrine of cultural relativism. One thing I will say here, as just kind of a side note, is that just because two different cultures disagree on something being moral, that doesn't necessarily imply that the disagreement shows that there can be no morality. So what I'm trying to say is, just because, let's say, you have a flat earther and someone who believes that the earth is a sphere, a globe, just because they disagree, that doesn't mean that there's no objective like facts or grounding in the matter. Whether or not that applies to morality can be argued, but that's just something I want to kind of leave you with today as far as that. And then the third branch of philosophy is logic, the study of correct reasoning. So this is why I say that philosophy deserves a bit more respect, is because everyone has opinions, everyone has opinions, and everyone has opinions, but not many people have good logic. So one thing I kind of believe to an extent is that you are not entitled to your opinions. You are entitled to how well you can defend them. So I don't care if you believe you can believe whatever you want. That's one thing. But to then argue against other things and to argue for your own, you need to really build up your ability to defend what you believe. So the study of correct reasoning is super important. Logic is a language, and it does have an arithmetic to it. So let's say, for example, you go to Japan and you are speaking Korean. No one's gonna fucking understand you unless they speak that language. But basically, logic is like that as well. If you want to have a logical discussion about whatever topics you want to argue against, and we'll be talking about this because I will be having a very simple class, I guess you could call it, in formal logic. But if you aren't speaking the exact same language, then there's no possibility for a productive argument or a productive conversation. And then there's an arithmetic to it, so there is such a thing as better or worse arguments, as they kind of whether they are deductive or inductive. We'll kind of get into that later. But you can't just rely on, well, that's what I think is right. Well, that's what I've been told. Well, this is what I've seen, and all those kinds of things. That's not good logic. There is an arithmetic to it that we can actually derive meaningful data from. And then, of course, with logic, there's something called argument form, and we'll go over that later. And then finally, there is ethics, which is the study of morality. Like logic and ethics are usually classes that take an entire semester to learn. So it's not something that I'm just going to go into right now. Same thing with metaphysics and epistemology, but because they relate to one each other so well, or so much, that it becomes something that you run into anywhere you go. So there's that. But this is just the initial crash course in philosophy. It is just the initial introduction to the concepts. And yeah, if this is something that you find interesting, I will be making these videos, well, because I want to, because this is something that I find interesting, because this is something that I want to learn more about. And the best way to learn about something is to continue teaching, is to teach others or tutor others with it. So that's it for this video today. If philosophy is something you are interested in, leave a comment in the comment section below. If you have ideas on any fitness related content that you would like to see on my channel, you can leave that in the comment section below as well. Otherwise than that, please like, comment, and subscribe. My name is karelstandstrength.com, and I'll see you in the next one. Peace.